I'm going to give you the secret to making sure that you've got all of your medical records, that it's a complete set of medical records. Certification on a medical record means absolutely nothing. When you get a piece of paper that certifies from the medical records custodian of the hospital that it's a complete and accurate set of the records, you might as well ignore that. That is ridiculous, because most of the time, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the time, the certification that goes with the medical records is inaccurate. So you may ask, so how do I know when I've got a complete set of medical records? Because that is critically important to your case. I'm going to give you a few tips. Number one, under federal and New York law, you are entitled to what's called an original chart review. An original chart review means that you actually go to the hospital or the doctor's office and you compare the records that you possess to the electronic records that the hospital has. And what you're gonna find is there's a lot of records that they never gave you, even though the record was certified. So you look on a computer screen, you compare what you have to what they have, and that is really the only way of knowing that you've got everything. That's tip number one. Tip number two, a lot of the records are not just in one department. For example, radiology may have their own set of medical records that are separate from the rest of the hospital. Billing may be separate from the rest of the hospital, so you have to go to each one of those departments to get their records. So for example, in radiology, there may not just be an MRI or a CAT scan report, but there would also be what's called a requisition slip, where the ordering physician writes the reason for the order, the imaging study. That's really important. In fact, it can be critical. Billing records also will have the name of the employer. Who did the hospital bill for the medical services? So the employer of each one of the individual doctors will be identified in the billing record. So if you're not sure who the employer was for a certain physician, get the billing records. That will tell you who their employer was. Tip number three here, the audit trail. The audit trail is by federal law considered part of the medical record. The audit trail is an electronically generated document that shows the date, the time, and the name of every person who has made an entry in the medical record, whether they've added, deleted, or made changes, but also the substance of every entry that they make in the record. The audit trail is critically important to your case. You can get the audit trail under federal law before the filing of a lawsuit or after. Either way, you are entitled to it because it's part of your medical record. So get the audit trail. And most importantly, what's called the unredacted audit trail. Some hospitals will redact portions of the medical record inappropriately. You want the unredacted audit trail. Tip number four, surveillance videos. If you have an emergency room case where you or a member of your family were there, I guarantee you there's surveillance cameras throughout the emergency room. Just look up and you'll see cameras all over from different angles. When somebody is treated, the hospital will claim we gave them impeccable care, but the patient will be like, wait a minute, what they're saying is not true. A video is the best evidence that you're ever gonna have. So what you do is, if you're considering bringing a claim, you send a preservation letter by certified mail to the hospital. You ask them to sign it, their risk management department, and you're basically asking them to preserve all of the video. Let's say that you were in the emergency room, all the video for the time that you were there, let's say between 3 and 4 p.m. on a certain date. And what you will find out is that most hospitals will have dozens, if not hundreds, of surveillance video cameras all over the place. But the problem is that the video, they keep it only for a certain period of time. So they might only keep the video for like 30 days. And after that, it's gone because it overruns itself. So you want to get that preservation letter to the hospital as soon as possible to make sure that the surveillance video is not overrun in the course of time, that it's preserved by the risk management department of the hospital. That's really important, because if you can show what happened, it's far more compelling than what's contained in a record. Now, the other thing is, when you bring a lawsuit, you have the right to do an inspection of the hospital. Your attorney and the attorney's experts can actually go to the hospital and inspect it. So, for example, if there's a critical event that occurred in a certain room of the hospital, what your attorney should do is actually serve a notice of inspection and go inspect, photo, and videotape the area of the hospital where this happened. Let's say that a patient was dropped in the course of their care, or some event happened in the hospital. You want to know the exact layout, what it looks like, the whole thing. And that's not going to happen unless your attorney does an inspection of the hospital. That's really important. I did an inspection of an emergency room, and before the inspection, I had a diagram that showed all of the surveillance cameras in the emergency department. When I did the inspection, I realized that the diagram did not have all of the surveillance cameras that were actually there. There were a number that had not been listed on the schematic drawing. And I'm like, wait a minute, why didn't we receive the video from these cameras? I never would have known that unless we had done the inspection of the hospital. So that's really important. The other thing is, when nurses and doctors are going into patients' room, they'll have a key fob that grants them access to the room. And you can get the electronic information from the hospital indicating the date, the time, and the name of each person, like when they entered the room, maybe even when they left the room, the whole thing. So for example, in one of our cases, we were able to piece together through the electronic data when persons entered the room, the whole thing, how long they were there, everything. So the data that's available to you in a medical malpractice case is far beyond that crappy certified medical record that they're giving to you. There's so much more that's out there, but you and your attorney have to go get it. That's the key thing. You can't expect that the hospital's just going to give it to you. And if they say, no, we're not giving you the audit trail, or no, we're not giving you the electronic data about the entrance and exits from the room, that's when your attorney needs to push the envelope and make sure they get that. I hope this was helpful to you. If you write a comment, I will respond to it. I really appreciate it. Please share the video, subscribe. We'd love it. And I will see you next time.